Hello, and thank you for joining us today as we discuss building relationships with what is truly an all-star panel. My name is Amy Goldstein. I chair the training webinars for the Legal Mentor Network, and I'm the founder of Grace and Allen, a recruiting and career coaching firm for attorneys. If you are not familiar with the Legal Mentor Network, it is a nonprofit organization that focuses on providing free legal mentoring to law students and junior attorneys. If you are interested, you can find out more information at our website. This is for mentees and mentors. It is very easy to sign up, and our website is legalmentornetwork.org. Please put your questions in the Q&A as we go along. We will take them when we can, and we will be leaving time at the end to answer them. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to our moderator, Randy Rosenblatt, for introductions.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. I am Randy Rosenblatt. I am a lawyer by background. I'm also the founder of Upward Stride. I do business development training, coaching, and consulting for lawyers and law firms. I'm going to give everyone on the panel a chance to introduce themselves, and then we will jump in. We have a lot to cover today. So let me start. I'm just going to go in order of my screen with Renee.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Renee Zaitsev. I'm a partner at Boies Schiller Flexner, and I focus on securities litigation. And I am also the chair of the New York chair of the Legal Mentor Network.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Hey, I'm Matt Schwartz. I'm a partner and chair of the U.S. finance practice at DLA Piper. I'm one of the co-founders of the Legal Mentor Network, and super excited to be here talking about one of my favorite topics with you all.
Great, thanks. And lastly, Kyle.
Hi, I'm Kyle Robish. I'm the partner in charge of the Latitude Tampa office. We're a Flex Legal Talent company. Before that, I was a partner at Bradley Aaron Bolt Cummings and an associate at Venable. And I'm really excited to talk to everyone.
Great. So let's jump in here. Like I said, we have a lot to cover. I want to start with kind of the mindset behind relationship building, right? Like we have personal relationships. We're here talking about professional relationships. And anyone can chime in on this, obviously, to start, but kind of your view on building new professional relationships and kind of as a long-term play, that those relationships being a tool to scaling your business. So let's start with mindset. Kind of as you're going into this, what's the mindset behind it?
So I can kick this one off.
Go ahead, Renee.
Sorry, I can kick this one off. You know, for a very long period in my career, my mindset was kind of negative about business development in the sense that I felt like it felt unnatural. It felt like it gave me the ick, you know, like to kind of, it felt too salesy, and like I couldn't picture. It just didn't feel authentic. The idea of doing it, it felt like I was always selling something to someone, and people don't want to be sold on things. And so I just never really did it, and I never really focused on it. And I don't really know what I was thinking my long-term plan was at that time. But, you know, that was a long time ago. And then at some point, my mindset really, really changed about it. You know, I think that there's a big crossover between the personal and professional. So, and I think that when you build your network, people that you meet tend to fall into a couple of different buckets. And obviously the easiest bucket is when you meet people that you just naturally connect and click with. And it becomes easy to build a friendship with them and then have professional crossover in that friendship. And I think we can get into more, I don't want to spend too much time here at the outset, but I think one of the biggest things that changed about my mindset is I stopped seeing it as like an icky sales thing. And I realized that it's just nice to build authentic relationships with people. And if I can help them with a problem, whether it's a professional problem or something else, it gives me pleasure to do that. And those are the foundations of some of the best relationships that I have.
So I think, Renee, actually what you're saying is like you kind of took the business development piece out of it in a way, right? You kind of just
with some people
relationships.
Yeah, right, not exclusively, but it really did. I had to change the way that I was thinking about business development from looking at it as just being a sales thing to being a way to actually build authentic relationships with people.
Sure.
Yeah, I
Matt?
mean, that's my my takeaway, my sort of theory of relationship building is a nice piggyback off of that, because the thing I always find myself saying to people is like law is a long game. And most things are a long game, but law, for at least what I've lived, right, for a decade, is a long game. And what I mean is, you know, anytime you interact with somebody, you're putting a point on the reputation board, negative or positive, right? Opposing counsel, a judge, your colleagues, your partners, your clients, right? And yeah, today you know where everyone is on the board, but you don't know where everyone's going to be in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. I mean, in my career, I started at Venable in DC. I was going to be there forever when I was a third-year associate with my clerkship. I wasn't there forever, right? I moved to Florida. I went to a law firm, made partner down here. And some of my first clients were referrals from people at Venable. When I was working at Venable, I was focused on doing good work for them, just showing up, being a good associate. I was not thinking about referrals in 7 years or in 5 years. Yet that's kind of where things took me. And that was just because I showed up for those people in the way that I was supposed to at the time, kept in contact, was a good person. And they were like, hey, you're someone that we're going to think of when we have that need. I never saw that coming. I never saw my career taking that turn. But if I hadn't had that mindset kind of the whole time, who knows whether the opportunity would have popped up. And there's 1,000 versions of that story, at least in my career, that led me to here today.
So Matt, I want you to chime in on this, but I also kind of want to layer it with the whole idea of authenticity and showing up as yourself and connecting based on common interests, and kind of how does that play into all of this?
Yeah, look, I'll echo what was said. I think business development is a terrible word or phrase, and you should get that out of your head, because it's really more about developing relationships, and things come out of developing relationships, including business, friendships, feeling good about yourself. There's lots of good things that come out with building relationships with other people in your industry. I do think that doing it authentically removes some of that icky feeling, right? Where, like, if you're just yourself and you connect with people who you have things in common with, and those things in common can be your personal background, hobbies, interests, professional interests. It could be your kids. It could be all kinds of things. If you find ways to authentically connect with people, there is no downside to that, right? Like, nothing bad can happen. And the earlier you do that in your career as a lawyer, the more you're going to enjoy your career. And I think that there's a mistake that people make early on. And some of it is a mistake of big law firm focus. Some of it is self-made within people, where they go, hey, I'm a first year, I'm a second year, I'm a third or fourth year. All I need to do is focus on the work and not on building relationships. And that is flat out incorrect, right? From your very first day of being at a law firm, and that's, the experience I can speak to, you should be building relationships both externally and internally, getting to know the people you work with, getting to know the people who run the various groups at the firm, getting to know not only the lawyers, but the people who run the offices, who run the catering, who do all of the various things that make the operation tick, and building relationships with them in an authentic way. I think connecting with people authentically about things that matter to them and matter to you is it can't be overvalued. It's just and like Kyle said, it is a long-term. Building relationships takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. The people who are your best friends are people you've been friends with for a very long time. And so you never know where a particular relationship is going to take you. There are people who I've sort of built relationships with for decades now, but I've never actually done any actual work with. There are people I've built relationships with for a very short time who ended up sending us a whole ton of business right out of the gate. And so I think when you kind of separate the two and realize that, getting work, people send work to people they like and trust. And there's no better way to get people to like and trust you than to build an authentic relationship with them, right? People just assume that as an attorney, especially at a big law firm, that you've got the legal skills to do the legal work, right? There are literally hundreds of lawyers that can do the legal work that we do. It's more about the confidence and trust and relationships that have been built up in a really authentic way. And, if it's not authentic, people will see through that very quickly that enable you to kind of take the next step in your career.
So Matt, I actually want to follow up on one thing you said. You said there are people I've built relationships with for a very long time that I've never worked with.
Correct.
Can you share examples or any examples of other professional benefits that have come from those relationships, even if they didn't give you work or you didn't work with them directly?
Sure. I mean, I can give you a great example. I won't name names, but there is a guy that I've known probably for 15 plus years. He was a senior person at a private credit fund in our space. We've met at conferences, we've played golf, we've hung out, we've gone to dinners. We tried to get his fund as a client for a long time. Never cracked into it. Just never have. They've got 2 law firms they work with. They've never expanded the pie, but we've known each other forever. Okay. Within the last year, he's moved from that group to another group, right? That already happens to be basically, he went to an existing client of our firms to start up a group doing exactly what he was doing at this other place that place didn't have, right? So now we've got a whole 15 years of relationship built up. So when he moved over to this other firm, of course, we're someone that he thought of right out of the gate, right? But he's also, we've gone to dinners with lots of other clients of mine. He knows other people who are in the industry. People have, said to him, hey, do you know Matt? He's been a referral for me. He is, we kind of have a mutual network of people. So even though we've never actually done 1 minute of billable work for that person or their organization yet, the decade plus of relationship we've built up has lots of benefits that, have already paid off in many ways. And now are potentially, going to lead us to having a new actual source of revenue 15 years later. It
Yeah.
really is a long game.
Yeah, that's great. Kyle, anything related in terms of authenticity, how you had it kind of play out in terms of the evolution of your relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of these themes start to dovetail, and I think we all had similar experiences. We've lived them. For me, part of that long game and authenticity, they all go together, right? And I connect with people that seem like-minded, and sometimes they're not like-minded. We can agree to disagree or whatever it might be. But if you find a connection point and you sort of lean into it with somebody, whether it's a sports team, a hometown, being an alumni of a school or a law firm, whatever it might be, you kind of let that take you through the relationship. You'll find in 3, 5, 10 years, you have this really rich circle of people, some of whom, like Matt said, might be clients of yours today, some of whom might not be, right? But the people that have bought into you've bought into yourself, and you're probably going to feel pretty good about where you are in your career. You're going to probably start to see really good things coming your way. You're probably going to be giving good things, but it all starts with leaning into being authentic and not saying, hey, can I get your business? Hey, do you have a deal I can work on? Instead, hey, let's grab coffee. Hey, let's grab lunch. I saw you're from Kansas City, just like me, right? Or, hey, you're a Gator. We'd love to talk to another Gator, just kind of pick your brain, see how things are going. I mean, as an example of the last one, I mean, when I moved to Tampa, COVID had just hit, and I had a lot of Gator connections, but not in the Tampa business community. So I reached out to someone on LinkedIn who is a big Gator in town, and he took the time to sit down with me once we could do that. And now 4 years later, I mean, we get together once a month. He's the president of the UF Alumni Association. He's referred me potential work and clients. When I reached out, I was not at all thinking about that as like a business contact. It was like a personal Tampa contact. And now look what it is, right? The whole point though was Gator to Gator, authentic connection, show up, be consistent, and then see where it takes you.
Absolutely. So Renee, along these lines of authenticity and kind of your experience in building the relationships, how do you take a new relationship that you have built authentically to the next step, right? So to Kyle's point, to Matt's point, you connect on baseball, you connect on, being a Gator. Then what? What happens next?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that's always the hardest part. So the easiest part, believe it or not, tends to be the actual initial outreach, because you can always sort of say, hey, it was so nice to meet you. Let's grab a coffee sometime. I think it's harder to then keep steady follow-ups, because you never know. I don't know. In my mind, at least, I never want to be annoying, or overstep or anything like that. So I think that I think that is the hardest part in terms of how to take it to the next level. I think it's finding reasons to reach out and be helpful. I've contacts where we just sort of every couple of months I'll reach out and say, hey, how's it going? Let's catch up, and we'll schedule a Zoom and or coffee if they're in person, if they're local. And we'll just catch up, and it's not even necessarily a business related conversation, but then I think you have to kind of sprinkle in the mix there. I, for example, follow a lot of different companies. I set up alerts so that I can see when they get sued. As a litigator, that's what I want to see, right? I want to see when they're getting named in complaints. And so a lot of times I'll see that some dinger came up and, oh, wow, this company is just got sued for some contract thing that I think would be perfect for me. And so I'll reach out and say, hey, is this the kind of thing that might make sense for us to handle? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is, yeah, let's have a conversation about that. Those are ways to do it. I recently switched firms. That's always a nice excuse to reach out and say, hey, let me introduce you to my new team. I think also just finding other sort of touch points in the middle. I write a lot. I'm a big article person. And so one thing I should do better, I do it a little bit, but I should do better, is taking that work product and actually sending it out to my contacts that I think would benefit from it. And it's hard to do. It's easier said than done because it just takes a lot of time. But that's the kind of thing that absolutely I think helps take things to the next level, because that's really a professional reach out where you're sending them something that you wrote that is relevant to their business, and that helps them in some way. So, I think it just kind of depends on the specific relationship, but it's ultimately about trying to be helpful and trying to address their specific needs. And I guess the last thing I'll say just on that last point, sometimes what I'll do is actually ask people, what are you thinking about these days? What is worrying you? What are the things that are going on in your mind in terms of what you're thinking about for the upcoming legal issues? And then I can kind of get a feel for what they're thinking about and whether any of the things that they've mentioned is something that I or someone that I work with could potentially help with. And I think that creates a very, very natural segue to say, you know what, that's an interesting issue that you just raised. Actually, I just handled that exact type of situation, or my partner is a specialist in that specific thing, and try to take it to the next step that way.
Matt, what about you? Is there strategy behind, and it won't always be the same, but how you nurture a new relationship, right? Someone you met based on a common interest, someone that you authentically are kind of getting to know. Is there strategy behind how you advance that relationship?
I don't really have a strategy per se. I think everyone is a case by case basis. It just depends on who they are, what you connect on. I do think you need to be strategic when you go, okay, is this someone who's likely to be a client of our firm? Yes, no. This is someone who's maybe a referral source, but never really going to be a client. Okay, that's someone, you kind of catch up with every now and then, or you think about them when you need them. If it's someone who's directly in the bullseye or in the adjacent to the bullseye of some of the type of, institution or person that you represent, then of course you're going to follow up with them and go, hey, I know this is the industry that you're in. Here's an article that one of my colleagues wrote, or, hey, we're doing a conference about this, or I saw this issue came up. It looks like we closed a deal in your space. So I think in a way I guess there is a strategy, but it's more of like, it's like a one-off, just depending on who the person is and, and something you kind of have to feel out, right? There's no like roadmap, I don't think, to it. It's a feel it out, get a sense for, what they are and what they need. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's someone I've known for a long time that I never got really the warm and fuzzies from, who's right in our wheelhouse. And I reached out to this person recently. I hadn't heard from them in a while, had a catch-up call. We got on the phone and they were distracted doing their email. They were eating lunch. they didn't really seem engaged. And I was just like, you know what? This is like a waste of time. Like, why am I, it was scheduled for 30 minutes. We got off the call after 7 minutes because I could tell they didn't really want to be there.
They may
And
be
so-
on this Zoom right now, by the way, but whatever.
What's that?
They may be on this Zoom right now, but.
They're definitely not on the Zoom right now.
That'd be a good thing. That means they were interested.
Right.
Yeah, no, they're definitely not on they're definitely not here now. But it's okay, right? I could tell like they, I was offering some things that are like adjacent to them that would be helpful. And I was getting the like, yeah, no, I'm not really interested vibe. And I was like, all right, forget it. It's fine. Move on to the next thing. So I think a lot of it is just getting and not being offended by it, right? I didn't get off the phone going, oh man, what's wrong with that person? Like that wasn't the right moment for them. They didn't need some people's cups are overflowing and they don't need help. Some people's aren't. So I think getting to kind of know your audience and figuring out what someone needs in the moment, when it's the time to aggressively pursue them, when it's time to not, that's something you have to learn with experience.
I think some of this is also like very much like staying on the radar, because that same guy may have hung up with you and then all of a sudden what you were offering he does need tomorrow, and he was just on the phone with you yesterday, right? So with that in mind, actually, Kyle, obviously speaking to nurturing the relationships, but also kind of the process, and whether you are doing this or wish you were, right? Everyone here has a day job, and kind of building relationships is a part of that. But how do you stay organized in this, right? Like I'll tell you in my work, like one of the biggest, I constantly say there are a lot of zeros at the end of the number of dollars of business that falls through the cracks because somebody forgets to follow up, or the article you wrote is relevant for A, B, C, D, but you forgot about C and D, or you ran out of, right? Things like that. So any ideas, and everyone of course chime in, but how do you stay organized in these efforts to build relationships? It doesn't make them less authentic. It doesn't make them, any less. And, when we talk about strategy, it's not, to Matt's point, it's not kind of one road, leads to the end of all of this, but there are platforms that have been effective. Is there methodology you've implemented? Is it simply Outlook? Is there a CRM? So what's working, or what do you wish you were doing? Is it fair too?
I have two kind of thoughts on this. One is a cheat code that I use, and the other are processes. So I guess I'll start with the processes because they're a little more straightforward. I mean, I do keep a Excel spreadsheet, and I'm pretty good about it. I'm not always A+ about it, but if people I've met, generally in my field, that I thought the conversation went well, or they were interesting to me, or I just like talking to them, right? And they may be immediate prospects. They might never be prospects. I don't know what's going to happen, but I felt good about something. But there was some reason for me to keep them top of mind, and I will save them on a Google Doc Excel spreadsheet, and then once a week, once every couple of weeks, I'll pop through that and see who I haven't talked to lately, and just drop a line. And it could be anything. It could be like, hey, I was thinking about you, saw X, Y, or Z. How's it going? Do you want to Zoom or hop on a call or whatever, right? But that way I'm constantly, at least once a quarter or so, seeing if there's someone I want to catch up with, whether personally or professionally, and being intentional about it, but having somewhere to go that sort of like is consistent in terms of that right, of people that I think are helpful to know and that I enjoy being around. I also set myself reminders on Outlook. So somebody invited me to follow up in a couple of weeks on a leave coverage request. And I said that, like, as soon as the email came in, I said, great, sounds good, no worries. And then I set a reminder on my tasks on Outlook, 2 weeks, Friday, follow-up, right? Those things go a long way. My cheat code to all of this is, if I think of someone, I try to act on it. And that just makes it a lot easier. So what do I mean? I mean, if I'm watching the Super Bowl and I'm a Chiefs fan, which I am, and the 49ers are playing, I'm texting my friends who are from San Francisco or 49ers fans. Hey, blah, 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 saw this thing. Oh my God, we're going to kill you. Or, oh my God, we're losing, whatever. Like, or someone got a new job, or someone moved to a new city or whatever. So if I see something that makes me think of a person, no matter what it is, I try to fire off a text or an email in the moment. What does that mean? It means that I'm constantly reaching out to people naturally, organically, usually on a authentic touch point, and it doesn't feel forced. And that goes a long way in helping me stay up to date with people.
That's great. Renee, Matt, any other processes? And we actually have one question that weaves well into this, and that is if anyone's leveraging automation tools built into CRMs. Of course, that presumes you're using CRMs, so we could start there. But if you are you leveraging the AI involved?
Yeah, I have to say, I don't use any sort of specific software. I have an Excel spreadsheet of my contacts, and I do something very similar to Kyle. In a perfect world, I would, note when I last spoke to that person, and I would write down things that I know I'm going to forget, like the names of their kids and things like that. And so many times I wish that I had, written that stuff down so that I could say, hey, how's Bobby instead of how's your son? But it just takes so much time. And I think that we just have to be realistic. At the end of the day, our job is a service profession, and we all get busy. And I think we can't put too much on our shoulders where it's going to serve as a block to actually doing those things. So everyone has to find what works for them. What works for me is kind of doing something similar to what Kyle said. I go down my list once in a while. I'll reach out to people I haven't talked to in a while. And I'm also very good, as Kyle said, about interacting with people like in the moment that I think of them. And I think what one of the things that I think COVID changed, at least for me, is I think it's much more normal to text professional contacts now than it was before because people were home. And so that I think lends itself really well to establishing like a back and forth, or just an ability to just be like, hey, I just walked by this thing. Here's a picture of this thing I saw that reminds me of you. And so that's something that I think has changed for the better in terms of our ability to find natural, regular interactions with people.
Okay. Matt, any processes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't use a CRM or have a formal process. I've become I use LinkedIn quite a bit to keep up with people, both by posting proactively and then people reacting to those posts, and by looking at what other people are talking about. Most people, when they change jobs, they put it on LinkedIn. When big deals get announced, they put it on LinkedIn. When there's when there's hot button issues or things that come up in the industry, people attending conferences, they throw it on there. So I tend to use that a lot. I think it's more informal too, kind of, if it's quiet and I haven't heard from somebody in a while, we'll kind of go, hey, we haven't heard from them, reach out, see how things are going. I don't use a formal process. That's not to say that wouldn't be effective. I just have never done it. Now, that being said, we do have folks here internally who are tracking big picture, what clients we're working for, what we're doing for them. And from time to time, we'll sort of look at trends. Hey, this client's trending up, this client's trending down. And if we see that a client is trending down in terms of the amount of work we're getting from them, I'll kind of look at that and go, all right, do we think that's something to do with us? Is there an outreach? Do we even care? So I think data is helpful, but again, it's, as lawyers, numbers aren't necessarily our best friends. So I think I've gone with a more feel it out strategy. That's not to say that that you shouldn't use a more data-driven, organized, strategy. But I do think that if someone goes, oh, the first Monday of every quarter, I get an email from this person asking how I'm doing, like, it starts to feel robotic over time.
Absolutely.
And less relationshipy, right?
Yeah.
As
So
opposed to like, hey, I'm watching my team kick your team's ass. How's it going? That is definitely more authentic, right? Or, hey, I saw this thing and it made me think of you, or saw you change jobs, saw a deal announcement, saw you hired someone, saw you guys did a big deal. Congrats on that. Those are the kinds of things. I mean, even if it's sometimes I'll see a client announce a deal that I know we didn't represent them on, and I'll just send them a quick note like, hey, congrats, that looks like a really great one, glad you got it done, or whatever, or ask a question, or offer some ancillary advice relating to it.
Mhm. So actually, along those lines, just I guess a tip for the audience: when you do that, just make sure you read content of whatever they are quoted in. There was a scenario where someone close to me received an email from someone congratulating them on something, and it was like they were on the opposite side of it. So, so just read the text. I guess one other thing, you know, to everyone's point here, right? Like the process is yours, and you figure out what works for you. There's resources at a lot of these firms, big and small, that not everyone knows about. So if a CRM is something that's interesting and sounds like something that would work for you, see if your firm has one. Excel's a great resource, obviously, and a simple one. The other one is Airtable. I don't know if you guys have used Airtable, but it's kind of like Excel on steroids because it becomes interactive and has some automations involved. So kind of a good way to track. The one other thing to kind of just chime in on this, by using, if a firm has a CRM that everyone is using, you get to see overlap. So I had a client of mine where I was working with a couple of lawyers at a firm, and I was the one who realized that they were both working with the same bank, the two partners, and they didn't realize that they had set up like different client matter numbers because they were different entities. But no one realized that this bank in two different ways was the firm's client, right? So like then they had opportunities to cross sell. So there's just value that comes out of that when you have access to it and when you leverage it and whatnot. Matt, not to pick on you, but you mentioned something and it's a good segue, and that is social media and how you've used it, how everyone obviously on this call has used it as an avenue for building relationships and what's worked. And whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, kind of where are you finding value in social media and that of your relationships?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's definitely been the most valuable place. It's interesting because I feel like LinkedIn is changing in a way. It used to be a really professional networking site. My personal opinion is that it's kind of devolving from that, especially in the last year or so. That being said, you know, it is still a great place to find out what people are up to, what they're doing, what people are talking about, what companies are doing. The interesting thing about LinkedIn is that company LinkedIn pages get like 1/fraction of the traction that individual people who work at those places traction get. So if you're a lawyer working at a law firm, your law firm might put something out there, a deal announcement, an article, and it will get 1/30th of the views that yours will get if you write your own content about the exact same topic. And so it's really becoming a place for individual people to build their individual brand as an offshoot of the brand of the place that they work. And that comes with a lot of challenges as well, because LinkedIn's changing a lot. It used to be a really great tool for business networking. It seems to be becoming more Twitter-y than it was before in terms of what kind of things people are posting and what the platform is allowing to be posted. I don't know if that's intentional or just the world that we live in. But I do think that, it's constantly evolving, and, people should just consider the industry they're in, the industry their folks are in. If you're in the entertainment industry or you're in the sports industry, or you do something that's less financially services oriented, Instagram or Twitter may be more applicable for you. If you're in government affairs or something like that, Twitter may be more applicable. If you're in consumer branding or anything like that, Instagram may be more applicable. So I think a lot of it is about knowing your audience and kind of feeling out, where things are at.
When you create content, and this goes for everyone, like when you create content for LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever your social media platform of choice, what are you thinking about? Is it kind of in terms of topics, in terms of approach, in terms of your audience? How are you deciding what you're posting? And what things that, as one follow-up question, where have you seen traction in terms of your content? What has been engaging to your audiences?
Yeah, I mean, so
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just finishing that thought. I mean, so for me, I think when you do LinkedIn, you should have a handful of themes. You know, there should be a professional theme that, you know, highlights your expertise or the things that you and your firm do. There should be mentoring is obviously a big thing for me. So I try to have a mentoring post within, you know, every week or every other week, and then something personal that ties back to it all. And I think that the key is being authentic and figuring out what you think will let people understand who you are, what you stand for. Again, that's becoming more challenging these days because of the environment out there.
How do you feel about, and Renee, Kyle definitely answered that question, but also like posting things that are controversial, right? There's more than one opinion on it.
Yeah, so I first of all, I agree with Matt's two big takeaways. My thoughts, anything I post on, I use a lot of Twitter and I use a lot of LinkedIn. I've gotten business both when I was at Bradley and at Venable and now at Latitude through relationships that I've built on both those platforms. But everything I want that pops up on those platforms, I want someone to meet me in real life and go, that's the same person. You're not a caricature, right? Like you're posting about the same things in the same way that you will have a conversation with me about over lunch or coffee. And that's to me the animating thing. And of course, buckets are helpful. And I think you kind of will naturally find those buckets, right? Like for me, I talk a lot about trying to be an active dad in my life and for my kids. And I try to talk about mentoring and I talk about like the leading edge of the law, because that's a little bit where my new space is, right? But it's something I've always been interested in. But those voices kind of naturally developed because those were things I was interested in. So I was passionate about them. So I talked about them and people paid attention, and then do this virtuous circle, right? I do, Randy, try to stay away from controversial stuff. Like I'll say what I think. I'm not gonna I will choose my words carefully, but I'm not gonna post something just to be clickbait most of the time. Like I'll do funny things, but like again, I'm not trying to throw something in the air and get a bunch of like angry and happy reactions and then have that be the interaction point. Sometimes you do say things that lead to strong opinions, and that's fine. I think that's good as long as you can kind of keep it that way. An example is I posted something on LinkedIn about a year ago. Morgan & Morgan down here posted something about how they were not going to give defense counsel any quarter. And I know people at Morgan & Morgan, it's a good firm and there are good people there. But I did not like that. I was like, it's basically weaponizing, you know, professional responsibility and civility in a way that just I don't think is productive. I got some really, really heated responses from both sides. And I wasn't really on the other side. I never did PI work. But I got 1,000 interactions, like a couple hundred comments, and I was not even thinking about that as the outcome, right? So it almost happened accidentally. And when it did, I was like, I actually don't know if I want. On one hand, I don't know if I don't want this. On the other hand, I got some very thoughtful engagement, and I saw some very thoughtful engagement from people. So you never know, right? What's going to happen or how things are going to be taken, even if you try to be intentional and thoughtful about it.
How have you seen kind of LinkedIn play out in relationship development juxtaposed with Twitter or Instagram or the other platforms you're on? Right? Because to Matt's point, right, like LinkedIn used to be solely professional. And to me, I agree, Matt, and I've agreed with this for a while, like these are all a little bit interchangeable, right? It's not like, oh, I posted this on Facebook, so like my professional people, they're never going to see this. Or like I'm on LinkedIn, so it's all like buttoned up and stuff, right? Like they just kind of blend a little bit now. But have you seen value from a professional perspective, Kyle, on the use of the different platforms?
In one sense, I use them the same way in that, like, again, what I'm gonna say on another platform is gonna be what you get from me in real life. And I try to use them in the same way too on the back end. And what that is, I try to take those relationships, show up, be persistent, be consistent. If I can take it offline into a Zoom or a real life meeting, I do that as often as I possibly can because I've really enjoyed that and gotten a lot of personal and professional value out of that. I will say, like, my Twitter account's a little more like after hours Kyle, and my LinkedIn's a little more like 9 to 5 Kyle. But again, in neither instance am I trying to be like a rabble rouser. That's just also not my personality.
Go to all of us, we should follow your Twitter.
I always say, like, if you love me on LinkedIn, don't go to my Twitter. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Like, the themes are the same. The stuff they're talking about is the same. Maybe I'm a little more off the cuff there, but
Right.
I do use them in a very similar way.
Right. Okay. Renee, any thoughts on this? And also any examples of relationships that have developed because of social media, which I feel like COVID kind of forced a little bit, thankfully, right? Like there's that I
Yeah.
have worked with as a result. I've written chapters in people's books or presented with them, and I forget we've actually never met like in real life. Even because now it's
So-
5 years later, but
Yeah, so look, I think everyone has to decide how they want to use LinkedIn. I'm not a content creator. I post, but I wouldn't consider myself a content creator. And I have, Matt posts a lot, and I appreciate his posts. And I give Matt a lot of credit because Matt, you are extremely authentic on Twitter, and I know exactly what you stand for. And like, I'm more of a coward. I don't want to post about political things on Twitter because I just don't want to alienate anyone, even though these are things that if you spoke to me in real life, I feel very strongly about, and I wouldn't necessarily have the same feeling about not voicing my opinion. But for me, I use LinkedIn more to, establish myself as a thought leader on the things that matter to me. And so I think that I'm less about getting the widest reach possible and more about posting things that are informative for the people in my network who that's useful for. I tend to post a lot about things that relate to developments in Delaware corporate law, for example, which really only matters to a small subset of people those are the things that I think for me, have the most direct relationship to what I'm trying to do with LinkedIn. In terms of developing relationships, I've found LinkedIn very helpful to develop relationships. I think one, it lets you, first, it's like an information tool. First of all, whenever I meet someone, I'm always looking on LinkedIn to see like who we know in common and if we went to the same schools or overlapped and posted about similar things, etc. So I think that's very, very helpful. I think it's helpful when sometimes there are people on LinkedIn that, I'll just realize that we might not be connected, but we have a lot of overlapping contacts or interests, et cetera. And it makes sense to connect and see if we can develop a relationship over that. I will say that there are people that I know that have used LinkedIn in really, really smart and effective ways. And I'm going to share one story. I'm not this good. This is not my story. But I have a good friend who, she's not a lawyer, she's in sales though. And, she's one of the most effective LinkedIn users that I've ever seen. And there's one specific example that I remember her telling me this story where there was a woman who was in her field and is kind of a prolific poster. She started following her on LinkedIn, not connected, just followed. Started commenting a little bit and interacting with this person on some of her posts. At one point saw that this person, actually, let me back up. One of the interactions was about sort of what would your superhero name be if you were, they're in cybersecurity, like if you were a cybersecurity superhero. And she saw that this woman was going to an event that she actually also happened to be going to. So ended up reaching out saying, hey, I'm going to be at this event. Found a time to meet up, and then brought a little superhero figurine to give to the woman when she met her. And I thought that was
Love
just
that.
it's amazing. I mean, the only thing that could have been better about it is if like her logo was on the figurine. But that's just to me is an example of someone using LinkedIn in a really, really thoughtful way. And in a way that really helped them to develop a relationship. So I think it can be a really, really powerful tool. I'm probably like, maybe I am like 60% there in maximizing my LinkedIn usage.
So the statistic was a couple of years ago, and I'm sure it's changed to a degree, but and this actually goes to one of the points Matt made, but people are 2.8 or people were 2.8 times more likely to look at your LinkedIn page than your law firm bio. Right.
Mhm.
So there's all
Yeah.
this money and time spent in the law firm bios, but like people aren't really hanging out there. So LinkedIn is free in many cases. So are we not kind of spending more time making sure that our LinkedIn profiles are not just resumes, but actually profiles that people want to engage in? So
Yeah. And I did want to just, make clear that, I don't think I actually post about politics on LinkedIn. I've always been very careful not to talk about elections or, things that I would view as controversial political topics. That being said, now that the door is open, I have posted a lot about anti-Semitism, especially in the last 7 months. I do think that the discourse around that, which in my mind isn't about politics, it's about good versus evil and right versus wrong, has been part of the devolution of LinkedIn, because there is a lot of, frankly, hate speech going on. I've received pretty violent hate mail messaging posts about me. I've also received hundreds of thank yous, right, from other, not just Jewish, but people who have said, hey, I don't have the guts to post about this stuff. Thank you for posting it, on our behalf. So, it has become an interesting evolution in the last, it's not like I'd never posted about this stuff before, but especially in the last, 7 months, it's become a pretty heated topic. Obviously, you can just turn on the news and see what's happening in the world and in our country. I personally don't think that's actually about politics. It's about something else. But I would advise people not to post about politics. You want to post about controversial issues, things that stir up a healthy debate, that's fine. In terms of like talking about elections or criticizing, actions of Congress or things like that, unless they specifically relate to your area of practice, that's definitely not what LinkedIn is supposed to be. It's kind of what it's becoming, which is unfortunate, but I would advise people to generally stay away from, those topics.
I agree with all of that. Kind of shifting gears slightly to building relationships with business in mind, and gender. And is there a difference? And obviously we can talk about this from, your perspectives on this call, but is there a difference in the process of building relationships and scaling your business based on gender? Right? Do we approach things differently or perceived differently? What have these are personal experiences, right? So like there's definitely data behind probably some of this, but in your personal experiences, is there a difference? And if so, how do you navigate it? Renee,
So I'm probably the best positioned to answer this question. I think there is without a doubt a difference based on gender. My best networking has consistently been with other women. There's a reason for that, right? And I think that some of it is that it's just easier to connect as a woman in a professional space. But I will say I've been to conferences, for example, where I can very, very clearly see that, I'm there with my male colleague who does the exact same thing as me, who's the same age as me. We have no like functional differences for purposes of this networking event, except for our genders. And our networking opportunities at those events are very, very different. He's going to golf with the boys and I'm staying behind and like meeting the women who are at the event, and we're networking among each other. So I definitely do think there's a difference. I think it creates challenges, not insurmountable challenges, but challenges, because I'm going to have necessarily a different experience when I reach out to a fellow woman than when I reach out to a man. I might not feel as comfortable saying to some guy like, hey, let's grab lunch together. It depends, right? It depends on their age, it depends on their position, it depends on a whole lot of things. But as a general matter, I'm probably more comfortable making a social type outreach with a woman. And I will say, like, even just very recently, a couple of weeks ago, there's a male contact that I have, and he doesn't live in New York, but he happened to be here. And so while he was here, I said, oh, let me take you out for a drink. And then after he accepted, I was like, okay, I should probably bring someone to this. And I brought someone. I didn't want to, it ended up being fine, and I would have been fine on my own, but you just never know. So it definitely is different, and you don't want people to get the wrong idea from what you think is a business related outreach and what they might be thinking. And so these are the things that I think women have to think about that men maybe don't.
Renee, is part of it though, also like, maybe you think about wording things differently to kind of, kind of cut off any other thought than like, this is professional.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's possible.
Matt, Kyle, do you, actually, before I jump to you, just a reminder to the audience, if you have questions, pop them in, just so we can answer them since we're at 12:53. Matt, Kyle, are these kind of thoughts that you have as you're building these relationships at all? Like, what's your perspective?
It's for me, I mean, I think about it sometimes, but I usually if I'm in a position where I'm going to, not always, but usually if I'm in a position where I want to sort of take a relationship on social media offline, we've interacted a bunch, right? Like we know each other, like through a lot of comment exchanges or DMs, or we were on the phone or whatever. And I think that does a lot of smoothing out of intentions, right? You're sussing out whether someone's trying to cross the line, like Renee alluded to, right? That happens. I have a lot of, especially female friends who've told me those stories. Not as many male friends, right? But you sort of feel each other out and you smooth out some of that weirdness on the front end, and then you go, okay, this is somebody I'd actually like to have lunch with. And that makes it a lot easier. Not always, but a lot of the time, at least in my experience. Because I've done the reverse where I've happened to be somewhere and I just met somebody and I thought we'd get along. And you're kind of sussing out some of that live, and you have some more hesitations and you're a little more careful. And I certainly, one thing I'm thinking about is I never want to be taken the wrong way. I don't want someone to think that I'm being unprofessional or crossing a line, particularly with women colleagues, because they get that a lot, or at least way more than I do. And so I never want to be taken that way, right? So I might take an extra couple of precautions to, I don't know, be clear about that. But again, most of the time I'm in a scenario where that's been smoothed out a lot naturally through the course of the relationship development.
What about what you ask people to go do? Grab a drink, grab a beer, play golf, whatever. Like, does it matter who? I mean, other than the fact that it should matter based on someone's interest, if you know what they are, but does gender play a role in that? For anyone, any question, the questions for anyone.
Not for me.
Yeah, not for me.
I do lunch and coffee the most, and there's not.
Yeah.
I think there's less of a risk of being perceived like drinks, right? You start to think about, okay, is there something else happening here? Maybe I'll do drinks with people with women or men that I know, right? But most of the time, the first couple times, it's no matter who they are, it's going to be a lunch or a coffee because it's neutral, it's easy, and it's pretty clearly like professional, right? Not always, but pretty clearly.
Just kind of a story that I find to be kind of funny, but I was emailing with somebody in like a prior role that I had to set up a meeting, and we set up the meeting, and when he got there, he said, I'm looking for Randy Rosenblatt. And I said, well, I am Randy Rosenblatt. And he goes, well, you're not who I expected because of my name. And I just said, well, surprise, like, here we are. This is what I got. I mean, it also says like, you should use your social media resources. You should check people out. Randy with an I is a female, but anyway, the meeting went great anyway. And who knows if I would have gotten it, but had he known who he was walking into, but nonetheless, just to kind of wrap up here, unless anyone pops into the Q&A, any stories that you could share kind of your best organic relationships in terms of how they've developed, from origination when they started and kind of where they are now and what that's looked like.
Good one.
Go for it.
Because I reflect on it often. Like, it reminds me of how this kind of can be done organically. So Matt Margolis and I are good friends. 4 years ago, we never talked to each other, right? Literally never, did not know each other. And back then, he and I were both associates, just toiling away at Florida law firms. And he started making these funny videos. they were getting like a couple of likes, right? Not tens of thousands of likes like they are now. But I reached out on LinkedIn and I was like, hey man, I just want to let you know, like I'm seeing your videos and I think they're really funny. Like I'm sitting in a litigation associate chair at a firm and I get it, it resonates. I just want to say that. And that touched off us becoming friends. And then 2 years later, he moved in house. When he got there, they needed a new senior living M&A team for lots of reasons. And that's one of the things my old firm was very good at. And so that door opened and he became one of my first 6-figure clients, right? And then he ultimately, ended up doing his own shop. And then I referred him a bunch of work. And then now he's a client of Latitude. My point being, like, when this all started, it was just like a litigation starlets being like, oh my God, we're billing hours. And like, these videos are cathartic, right? And we connected on that, never thinking we were going to be business partners or be referring each other work 4 years down the line. But here we are. And it all started with that authentic connection point where no one had any agenda other than being like, I like you and I like your stuff.
That's awesome when it works out like that. Yeah. Matt, Renee, anything to share? I know, Matt, you shared a great one already, but if there's anything else.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think I've got dozens of examples of, I mean, I could think of one person in particular. I literally met this person on their very first day at the job. They were a relatively junior person who had moved over to a client. We hit it off right away, became pretty close. Now that person's running an entire group at a different client. I mean, I can think of another internal counsel at a very large bank I got introduced to in the mid 2000s, who really just had a random question. We didn't really do a lot of work for them. We kind of stayed in touch over the years. And now we're doing, multiple 7 figures for this institution based on that relationship. Took 10 years, but it happened eventually. So I think just, like letting things marinate in terms of, and being helpful to people without an expectation of any sort of like, anything coming back in the interim is really the best bet.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, similar. I a lot of my best connections are people that I met when they were not anybody that I at that time could have gotten any business from. I mean, my office mate when I was a second-year associate is now, the chief legal officer at a major company. And like, these are, at the time, we were just like silly law firm associates making stupid jokes with each other. So you just really never know where people end up. And I think it's important to be gracious and, not burn your bridges by being a nasty person. Just harking back to something Kyle said earlier with sort of being nice to your opposing counsel and not making a bad name for yourself in front of people. Because that I have specific examples of how people that have done that to me have ended up on the other side wanting something. And I've been like, not so much.
So I know we're at time. I think there's a whole load of takeaways here, and I thank you guys for engaging in the discussion. But I think kind of the most simple way to put it is to be authentic, to be thoughtful, and to be patient as you're kind of out there building your relationships. And
don't forget, have thick skin. Not everybody's going to like you. That's okay.
Have thick skin. Yeah, have thick skin, and there nothing bad can happen, right? Like if we just kind of put ourselves out there in those types of ways. So Amy, thanks for putting this together, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Randy, Renee, Matt, Kyle. This was great. Really appreciate your time and insights. There are terrific takeaways for everybody on this call. And thank you all for joining. We are recording and it will be posted on YouTube within the next few days if you would like to review or share with your friends. And next week, the registration should be up for our June 6th webinar, which will be on executive presence. So everyone have a great rest of the day. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody.